They're walking. Mason Rowe's phone exploded against the marble. 3:47 a.m. His security app, live feed from the nursery. His 2-year-old sons, Knox and Elias, the twins doctors said would never move below the waist, never sit up, never have a chance, were standing. Wobbling, falling, standing again. The maid wasn't touching them. Imani Reeves knelt 6 feet away, tears streaming, singing something he couldn't hear through the silent feed. But he could see everything. Knox took one impossible step toward her voice. Elias followed, crawling, pushing, then standing. Mason's chest collapsed. 6 months ago, neurologists told him, severe spinal cord damage, permanent paralysis, they'll never walk. He'd fired 4 caregivers before Imani. 1 rough, 1 negligent, 1 quit saying it was too depressing. So he installed 37 cameras to watch, to control, to catch whoever failed his sons next. But what he was seeing now wasn't failure. It was impossible. He'd been watching through screens for 6 months, monitoring everything. But he'd missed what cameras couldn't capture. Faith. Mason grabbed his keys. 4 a.m., barefoot, unraveling. Because the maid he hired to follow protocols had just shattered every medical opinion. His sons were walking, and he hadn't been there.
Hey family, welcome back. If you've been here before, you already know, we don't tell stories to waste time. We tell them because buried in the chaos, in the heartbreak, in the moments that don't make sense, God is working. And if this is your first time here, I need you to understand something. You didn't accidentally click this video. Maybe you're a parent who's heard the words never or impossible from a doctor. Maybe you're fighting for someone everyone else has given up on. Maybe you've been praying for a miracle that feels like it's never coming. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be. This story isn't just about 2 boys who weren't supposed to walk. It's about what happens when one person refuses to accept impossible as final. When faith becomes louder than fear. When someone believes not because it makes sense, but because giving up was never an option. So if this story is already stirring something in your chest, if you feel tears rising before you even know how it ends, don't scroll away. Subscribe, not for me, but because you need to be reminded, miracles don't ask for permission. They just need one person willing to believe when everyone else has stopped. All right, family, let's begin. The car skidded into the driveway at 4:13 a.m. Mason didn't move. Through the windshield, the nursery window, 3rd floor, lights still on. She was still in there, with his sons who were walking. Mason Rowe didn't install cameras because he was paranoid. He installed them because he was afraid. Afraid of losing them the way he'd lost her. His wife died in their kitchen 6 months ago. Aneurysm. No warning. 2 weeks later, the neurologist said the words that killed hope. They'll never walk. He'd fired 3 caregivers before Imani Reeves. 1 rough, 1 negligent, 1 who quit saying it was too depressing. So he installed 37 cameras to watch, to control, to catch whoever would fail his sons next. But Imani didn't fail. She sang to them, held them like they were whole. And tonight she'd done the impossible. Mason opened the car door. The front door was unlocked. He never left it unlocked. Inside, singing, then silence, then footsteps, small, uneven. His sons. He climbed the stairs. The nursery door cracked open, golden light spilling through. He pushed it wider. Knox and Elias sat on the floor, backs straight, legs folded, staring at Imani. She looked up, tears streaming, not fear in her eyes, relief, like she'd been waiting for him. "Mr. Rowe," she whispered, "I need to tell you something about your sons." Mason's breath stopped, because whatever she was about to say wasn't a miracle. It was the truth. Maybe you're watching this right now and you've been told to stop hoping, that your situation is terminal, that the diagnosis is final, that the relationship is dead, that the dream is over. But what if, like Mason, you've been so busy protecting yourself from disappointment that you've stopped making room for God to move? If this story is already breaking something open in your chest, don't keep scrolling alone. Subscribe. Because sometimes we need strangers to remind us, faith isn't foolish. Giving up is. Mason's breath stopped. What about my sons? Imani didn't answer immediately. She looked down at Knox and Elias, still sitting, still staring at her, then back at Mason. They've been trying to tell you something for months. His jaw tightened. Tell me what? That they're still fighting. The doctors said. I know what the doctors said. Her voice was gentle but firm. But 3 weeks ago, Knox grabbed my finger. Not a reflex, a grip. Mason's throat closed. 2 weeks ago, Elias turned his head toward my voice, deliberately. She pulled a small notebook from her scrubs. I've been tracking every movement, every response, every time they tried. Mason stared at it like a grenade. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Silence. What happens now? His voice cracked. That depends on what you do next. What does that mean? The doctors will want tests. They'll call it an anomaly, study them like lab experiments. She paused. Or you let me keep working with them, quietly. You're not a therapist? No, but I'm the one who got them to stand. She was right. Every professional told him to give up, and a maid with a high school diploma had rewritten medical impossibility. What do you want? Permission to keep believing. So Mason watched the cameras, every night, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., watching Imani break every rule. She moved equipment aside, forbidden, laid them on soft blankets, against protocol, sang, prayed, talked to them like they understood, unprofessional. Week 1. She massaged legs doctors said would never work. Mason's irritation grew. Wishful thinking. Week 2, she stayed late, unpaid, reading stories on the floor. Week 3, Knox gripped her sleeve. Not a twitch, a grip. Mason rewound it, again. Coincidence. Week 4, Elias tracked her voice across the room. Mason told himself it meant nothing. But then week 5 happened. 2:34 a.m. Imani had gone downstairs. The twins were alone. And Knox was moving, rolling, pushing, trying to sit, without her voice, without her songs, without her. Mason zoomed in. Knox's face scrunched in concentration. And then he sat up, alone, in the dark. 5 seconds before collapsing. Mason's hands shook. If Knox could do that without Imani, then what the hell was happening? He scrolled through weeks of footage, looking for moments when the twins were alone. And he found them. Small movements, tiny attempts, things he'd dismissed as spasms, but now they looked like practice. Like his sons had been teaching themselves. Like they'd been waiting for him to notice. Mason pulled up Imani's employment file. Her previous employer made him freeze. St. Augustine's Pediatric Hospice. 3 years with terminal children. Children who weren't supposed to survive. He clicked the reference letter. One line stood out. Ms. Reeves has an unusual gift for bringing comfort to families during impossible circumstances. Several parents reported unexpected improvements in their children's final days under her care. Unexpected improvements, final days. Mason's heart hammered. Who exactly was Imani Reeves? And what had she done before she came to his house? 3:17 a.m. Mason watched through the security feed, breath trapped in his throat. The wheelchairs had vanished. Knox and Elias sat upright in the empty nursery, unsupported, backs straight, eyes fixed on Imani like she held the universe's secrets. She sang something ancient, holy. Then Knox reached for her. Elias followed. They fell, rose, tried again. Mason's phone cracked against the floor. His paralyzed sons were trying. He ran barefoot to the nursery, keys jangling. But when he burst through the door, empty cribs, sleeping twins, wheelchairs in place. Everything normal. Too normal. He checked the footage with trembling hands. 3:17 a.m. to 3:19 a.m., no recording available. 2 minutes erased. The exact 2 minutes he'd witnessed the impossible. Someone knew he was watching, and only one person could have known. Mason stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the empty space where impossibility had just lived. His hands still shook. The next morning, he didn't mention the footage, didn't confront Imani. He just watched her, differently this time. Not for danger, for truth. And at 10:47 a.m., during their physical therapy session, he finally saw it. Knox wobbled, fell forward into Imani's waiting hands, rose again. Elias reached, collapsed, tried again. Imani wasn't forcing anything. She was crying, whispering prayers Mason couldn't hear. The doctors called it neuroplasticity, impossible recovery, medical anomaly, but Mason knew better. He'd stopped trying to save his sons. He'd just stopped believing they could be saved. The cameras hadn't captured danger. They'd captured the miracle he'd refused to see. Mason closed his laptop, left the screens behind, and walked toward the nursery. The door was already open. Imani stood by the window, back turned, humming that same hymn. She didn't look surprised, didn't turn around, just whispered 4 words that made his blood freeze. "You're finally ready now." How many miracles have you missed because you were too afraid to believe? How many times has God been moving right in front of you, but you were too busy controlling, monitoring, protecting yourself from hope? Mason's sons were healing while he watched through a screen. Maybe it's time you stop spectating your own life. If you feel convicted right now, subscribe. Not because I asked, because your spirit knows. Faith isn't safe, but it's the only way forward. Mason's voice cracked. "Why didn't you follow the charts?" Imani finally turned. Her eyes held no judgment, only knowing. "Because I didn't know they couldn't," she said softly. "So I treated them like they could." The simplicity shattered him. All those monitors, all that control, all that fear. He'd been documenting their limitations. She'd been witnessing their fight. Mason dropped to his knees beside the cribs, touched Knox's hand without flinching, held Elias close without counting heartbeats, and cried, not from grief this time, from release. The cameras kept recording, but they weren't watching for danger anymore. They were just witnessing. Imani walked to the door, paused. "Mr. Rowe?" He looked up. "The footage from last night?" She smiled gently. "Some miracles aren't meant to be explained." The door closed, and Mason realized she'd erased it herself. This story ends here, but yours doesn't. Somewhere in your life, there's something you've declared impossible. A person, a dream, a wound, a prayer you stopped praying because the silence became unbearable. What if God is waiting not for you to understand, but for you to stop controlling and start trusting? Subscribe if you're ready to be reminded the God who heals paralyzed children is the same God listening to your quiet, desperate prayers right now. You're not alone in this.